and engineering. So I'd like to talk a little bit, first of all, about institutionalism, the second of the models that I talked to, the approaches that I talked about. So if you think about us in transport, we're usually trying to figure out, road carriageway, traffic signals, things like that. But institutional structure has a huge impact. So in the City of Toronto, the City of Toronto is in charge of all the roads and everything, and in charge of the Toronto Transit Commission, who run the transit. So very simple institutional structure. In Melbourne, it's pretty complicated. There's a whole load of different organisations under the state government, and this is something that's been in quite a bit of flux lately. We've had Transport for Victoria. Now there seems to be a move to split Vic roads into regional roads, Victoria, and Vic roads now being part of PTV, and it's all now under the Department of Transport, but then there's all these other actors out there who are busy doing projects, level crossing removal, and major road projects, and then at the same time the local government authorities still have, the little city councils still have control of the local roads and on-street parking, but say, for example, the local city can't set the speed limit without getting approval from Vic Roads or whoever Vic Roads turns out to be in the future. Talking a little bit about incrementalism, again I'm going to use an example from transit priority because that's what I'm studying, but fundamentally we might see how we could indent the parking, then over time we could paint the bus lane, and then we would remove the parking, and then finally we're going to get to a stage where we're going to have a fully separated bus lane. We can see over time we've only made incremental changes to the road network, whereas if we'd gone from the very first one to the very last one, all in one step, you could see that would have been quite a difficult thing to get through politically, and it would be quite a large change. So that's sort of where incrementalism is coming from, this idea that policy and changes on the road network happen over time, slowly, as a series of small steps. I quite like this one because it is very descriptive. This basically is saying how the political system is like a black box. Demands for change and support for those demands go into the black box. The black box comes out with decisions, and then things on the road network change, and then that means that there's more demands for change and more support for change, which result in more decisions. And we see this in many cases, like decisions that are made in cabinet. We often don't know why or how those decisions are made, and we never quite know how people on the floor of Parliament are going to vote. And these votes do affect the transport system quite a bit. Top-down implementation is an approach from the political models, so very much looking at how central government decision makers sort of lead down into policy, and then that changes into designs, and then engineers get into the design level, and that's how we result in changes. But this is all led from top down, and so in the case of Australia, we're seeing a lot of changes on the public transport network because of the DDA, the Disability Discrimination Act, a piece of federal government legislation, which then comes down into action plans and then accessibility plans, and then finally things like this, a major engineering project that has changed the face of Collins Street, and that has been designed by engineers, but it is designed to meet these goals of the DDA from the federal level. Bottom-up incrementalism and implementation models instead look at how people down at the bottom level, the designers, the transit staff, the police, can really have a larger influence on outcomes, and even sort of be pushing back up into changing policy. So if we again think about this example, you can see this little bit of yellow curbing here. That's not required by the DDA. That's something that a designer has put in as an extra, and that's actually helping to make trams have priority. So the final public policy analysis model that I'm going to talk about in this video is the garbage can model, which is sort of about how everything old is new again, and how sometimes you have solutions looking for problems. The idea of the garbage can model is that you put people, so engineers and planners and people like that, a problem and some solutions into a garbage can, into a box, and then out comes this solution, this implementation. But then later on down the track, you'll have a new problem, and you'll put new people and new ideas, new solutions in there. And unfortunately, the people and the knowledge and the ideas from the first problem might not push through into the second potentially related problem. When the first project ended, the only thing that emerged was the solution, and everything else that was left in the garbage can is lost. And I suppose this was the reason for this video was because Alexa in the previous video did mention that sometimes in transport we have solutions looking for problems. If all you're good at is building freeways, then everything looks like it needs a freeway. Anyway, so I suppose the key point, I suppose, is coming out of all of this is how can we improve things. In a rational view, would be looking to have better models and better options, better technology. But in the real world, we sometimes need to instead think about whether something we're proposing will have institutional support, and whether the things that we're proposing are small enough that they're not going to cause big ripples if we're looking at it through an incrementalist point of view. If you're in the political thing, maybe think about who wants what in the terms of what you're proposing. So if you're proposing to remove a whole load of parking, well, you're probably going to need to have to think about whether there's going to be a lot of opposition from local residents or shopkeepers, because they might not want that, regardless of whether it's an efficient outcome for the road network. In top-down implementation, we're thinking about supportive policies, and bottom-up, we're thinking more about training and tools for the people who are doing stuff on the ground. And in the garbage can model, you want to think about how some of the old ideas from previous projects where they've had similar problems to you might be relevant. Maybe you can get some of the old staff or some of the old ideas that have already been analysed and apply them to a particular problem that you're facing in your engineering practice.